The soft tick of the wall clock blended with the faint laughter of a child arranging her dolls on the coffee table. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one with the faded green velvet cover, a gift from my late husband Martin on our 20th anniversary. The sun filtered through the lace curtains and painted warm patterns on the old carpet. Everything looked just as it always had. Calm. Ordinary. Safe. But in a single moment, that illusion was shattered. My 8-year-old granddaughter, Lucy, had been playing quietly all afternoon. Her parents, my son Brian and his wife Tessa, had gone to what they called a charity function. I had long suspected it was less about charity and more about social climbing, but I never said it aloud. Brian had changed since marrying Tessa 5 years ago. More distant. Less present. Like someone I used to know but couldn't quite reach anymore. I was halfway through a row of knitting when Lucy suddenly stopped playing and tiptoed to my chair. She glanced at the hallway like a spy in a movie, checking if we were truly alone. Then she leaned in close, her tiny arms wrapping around my neck, her breath warm against my cheek. "Grandma Edith," she whispered with a seriousness far beyond her years, "Mom and Dad are sending you to a nursing home today." I froze. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that makes your heartbeat feel like thunder. I stared at Lucy, trying to process the words, praying I had misheard her. What did you say, sweetheart?" "I heard them last night," she said softly. "Mom said you're too old to live by yourself now, and Dad said it costs too much to keep taking care of you. They said the place has visiting hours only on Sundays." I couldn't breathe. My hands clutched the armrests as if I were bracing for an impact. I was 66, not frail, not helpless. I still cooked my meals, mowed my lawn, paid my bills. I hadn't asked them for a dime. And yet, they had decided to get rid of me, behind my back, like I was a burden too heavy to carry one day longer. I looked at Lucy's innocent face, her big brown eyes wide with concern. "Are you okay, Grandma?" she asked, placing her hand gently on my cheek. "You look like you're going to cry." I forced a smile, the kind you make when your whole world has just been kicked out from under you but you don't want to scare a child. "I'm okay, love. Just thinking about something." But I wasn't okay. I was devastated. Shocked. I had raised Brian with everything I had. I remembered the nights I stayed up when he had the flu, how I clapped the loudest at his school plays, the countless bedtime stories and scraped knees I'd kissed. When had that little boy, who used to cry if I left the room, become the man who was now plotting to erase me from his life? And then there was Tessa. Always polished. Always perfect. Designer heels, perfect hair, skin that smelled like expensive perfume. From day one, she'd made it clear I wasn't her idea of elegant. She disliked how Brian called me every day. Said I was too involved. Too stuck in my ways. Her comments were always wrapped in a smile but sharp enough to draw blood. "We should get you ready, sweetheart," I said softly, helping Lucy off my lap, my voice trembling. "Your parents will be here soon." As she picked up her dolls, I walked slowly to my bedroom. I passed the mirror on the dresser and paused, staring at my reflection. I looked every bit my age. Silver hair tied back in a simple knot, lines on my face from years of love, grief, and sacrifice. My clothes, though clean, were dated. I didn't own anything expensive or flashy. Perhaps to them, that's all I was now. Old, plain, unnecessary. But they didn't know everything. I reached for the oak jewelry box Martin had built with his own hands. Inside, beneath the velvet lining, I found the tiny brass key, the one that unlocked a truth I had hidden for years. Martin had been gone for 5 years now. After his funeral, I told Brian that his father hadn't left much behind. That wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The front door creaked open. I heard Tessa's high heels clack against the floor and her sharp voice cut through the quiet. "Lucy, grab your things. We're on a tight schedule." I closed the jewelry box and walked back into the living room. Brian stood by the door, avoiding my eyes. He had his father's broad shoulders but none of his warmth. Tessa barely glanced at me, her fingers dancing across her phone screen. "Thanks for watching her, Mom," Brian said, too casually. "We'll talk soon." The way he said it, cold. Final. I hugged Lucy tightly, trying to memorize the feel of her in my arms. "I love you, Grandma," she whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart. So much." And then they were gone. I stood in the silence, surrounded by photographs of Brian as a child. Smiling faces from birthday parties, vacations, his graduation. Had I been deluding myself all these years? Thinking we still had a bond, that somewhere beneath his new life and new wife, the old Brian still existed? I walked to the bedroom and pulled a battered suitcase from under the bed. I packed slowly, a few clothes, my medications, Martin's wedding ring that I wore on a chain, and, at the very bottom, a sealed envelope that Brian had never seen. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I wouldn't sit here and wait to be collected like some piece of old furniture ready to be discarded. My hands trembled as I zipped the suitcase and grabbed my purse. They thought they knew me. They had no idea what they were about to learn. The wind outside carried the faint scent of autumn, dry leaves scratching the sidewalk like tiny secrets no one noticed. I stood on the porch of the house I'd called home for 30 years, suitcase in one hand, my purse clutched in the other, heart pounding like a slow, sad drumbeat. I had no destination in mind, just the urgent need to leave before they came back, before they boxed me up and shipped me away like a problem they didn't want to deal with. I walked. The familiar streets looked different. The bakery on the corner still had the same window display. Mr. Cullen from 2 houses down was trimming his hedges. I even waved at Mrs. Green, who smiled politely, not knowing this might be the last time she'd see me as the Edith she thought she knew. They all had no idea what was happening behind my closed door, what my son and his wife were planning for me. I reached the bus stop, dragging the suitcase behind me like a tired companion. When the bus pulled up, I climbed in without looking back. The driver, a kind-looking woman in her 60s, smiled at me. "Where to, hon?" she asked. "Downtown," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "First National Bank." The bus jolted forward, and I stared out the window at the neighborhood slipping past. My feet ached, my back throbbed, but strangely, I felt alive. Like a switch had been flipped inside me. Fear was still there. Of course it was, but underneath it, something else stirred. A quiet strength. A reminder that I had not lived through heartbreak, raising a son alone after Martin's death, just to be treated like something disposable. As the bus rolled past the grocery store where I'd shopped every week for decades, past the little church where Martin and I had said our vows, I whispered quietly, "You were right, Martin. It's time." 30 minutes later, I walked into First National Bank, a place where I had made small deposits every month, never raising any eyebrows. I approached the counter, where a young man in a suit looked up from his computer with the polished smile of someone trained to be friendly. "I need to access my safety deposit boxes," I told him. "All of them?" "Certainly, ma'am. May I see your ID?" I handed him my card, and his eyes flicked to the name. "One moment, Mrs. Warner," he said, standing up a little straighter. "Let me get Mr. Davidson." Mr. Davidson, the bank manager, appeared within a minute. His smile grew wider the moment he saw my name. "Mrs. Warner. It's been a while. Please, follow me." His tone had changed. The polite customer service voice was gone. Now it was something closer to respect, the kind of tone I hadn't heard from anyone in a long time. The heavy vault doors creaked open as he guided me inside. When he inserted his key beside mine and opened the first safety deposit box, I saw it again in his eyes. Recognition. This wasn't just a retired widow rummaging through old papers. He knew exactly what I was here for. He stepped back. "Take all the time you need." Alone in the quiet of the vault, I opened the boxes one by one. Inside were the things Brian never knew existed. Financial documents. Investment records. Copies of patent filings. Martin's handwriting in notebooks where he documented every single invention, every royalty payment, every smart move he'd made to protect our future. It all began with the automatic pet feeder. Martin had built it in our garage, after our neighbor's dog kept tearing open our trash. He tinkered for weeks, finally coming up with a little machine that could feed pets on a timer. Nothing fancy, just something useful. When a pet supply company reached out about licensing the design, Martin laughed. Then the first check came. $12,000. For 1/4. That's when we realized we had something real. Over the years, Martin filed more patents. A medication dispenser for seniors, a watering system for plants, a programmable bird feeder. None of it flashy, but all of it useful. Companies bought the designs, and we invested carefully. Blue chip stocks. Real estate. Bonds. Quiet money that grew silently, while we kept living simply. No one suspected. When Brian graduated and started his engineering career, Martin and I made a decision. We wouldn't tell him about the money. Martin believed Brian needed to find his own path, build something of his own. If he knew we were wealthy, he might never push himself. And then there was Tessa. Even back then, Martin didn't trust her. She's not here for who he is, he told me one night, watching Brian and Tessa from the kitchen window. She's here for who she thinks he could be. I didn't want to believe him. But over time I saw it too. The way she pushed Brian to buy things he didn't need. The way she looked at me, like I was just an extra chore. Like I didn't belong. Martin passed away 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. Gone in 6 months. The day we got the diagnosis, Martin squeezed my hand and made me promise. Don't tell Brian about the patents. Not yet. Let him grow up first. So I didn't. I lived modestly. Clipped coupons. Drove the same old sedan. Let them believe I had nothing. But the truth sat in front of me now. In statements and balance sheets and tidy rows of numbers that added up to something I still had trouble believing. $17,200,000. That was the worth of the life Martin built in our garage, with tools from the hardware store and dreams he never bragged about. I had watched that number grow year after year, while pretending I didn't know how we'd pay the next utility bill. And now my own son, the boy I'd read bedtime stories to, was trying to throw me away for the same house he'd grown up in. He wanted to sell it. Use the money to patch up his broken finances. And Tessa, she'd been planning this move for months, researching the cheapest facilities, building a story about me being confused, so they could make it all sound reasonable. But they didn't know me. They didn't know that Martin left behind more than just money. He left me strength, wisdom, and a plan. My phone buzzed. Text from Brian. Mom, we need to talk. Are you home? I stared at the screen, then slowly turned the phone off. They thought I was waiting. But I was just getting started. I left the bank with my purse heavier than before, not from the weight of money, but from truth. Truth I had carried alone for 5 long years. The truth that my husband Martin had left behind a legacy, and I had protected it like a lioness guarding her last cub. Not out of pride or secrecy, but out of hope. Hope that one day, my son Brian would grow into a man who could carry it with honor. That hope was fading fast. I checked into a modest hotel just 3 miles from Brian's house. Nothing fancy. Just clean sheets, warm water, and quiet. From my room on the 3rd floor, I could even see the rooftops of the neighborhood where I had raised him, where little Lucy probably wondered why Grandma hadn't come home. That thought broke me more than anything else. Not their betrayal. Hers. Her confusion. Her little voice whispering truths she didn't fully understand. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone, which had lit up with missed calls and messages. Most were from Brian. Mom, please pick up. Where are you? We're worried. Tessa says you might be confused. Should we call someone? The nerve. They were still trying to paint me as unstable. Like I had wandered off by accident. They didn't realize I'd walked away on purpose. And then, Lucy's message arrived. Grandma, are you okay? Mommy says you're sick and had to go to the doctor. I miss you. Love, Lucy. I gripped the phone tighter, my eyes burning. They were lying to her. Telling her I was ill. Confused. Making her worry. Using her innocence as a shield for their plan. I had stayed silent too long. That was over. The next morning, I sat in the hotel lobby, waiting for a woman named Margaret Chen. Mr. Davidson, the bank manager, had recommended her when I'd asked if he knew a trustworthy private investigator. She's quiet, smart, and gets things done, he had said. When Margaret arrived, I saw exactly what he meant. She was in her 50s, petite, with calm eyes and a no-nonsense way of sitting that told me she wasn't going to waste time. What can I help you with, Mrs. Warner? I want to know everything about my daughter-in-law, I said without hesitation. Tessa. Her shopping habits. Her friends. Her routines. What she does when Brian's not home. And I want to know about their money. Not the pretend version, the real one. Margaret nodded. How deep should I go? All the way to the bottom. That night, I couldn't sleep. I watched the local news with the volume low, trying to drown out my thoughts. One story made me sit upright. It was about elder abuse. A woman in her 70s had been left alone in a facility without proper care. No family came to visit. No one checked in. I felt sick. Is that what I was becoming? A problem no one wanted to deal with? My phone rang. It was Margaret. "Mrs. Warner, I've got some early findings." "Already?" "I work fast." "What did you find?" She didn't waste time. "Your son and daughter-in-law are drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out. Second mortgage on the house. They're behind on car payments. And here's the part that might upset you. Tessa's been researching nursing homes for 6 months." My stomach dropped. 6 months? Yes, ma'am. Not quality places either. The cheapest ones she could find. A few of them even have reports filed for neglect. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe. So this wasn't a sudden decision. No. It was a plan. One they've been slowly putting together for half a year. There's more. Tessa's been telling people, neighbors, acquaintances, that you're getting confused. That you're hard to manage. She's building a story to make what they're about to do sound justified. I thought back to last week when Mrs. Patterson next door had looked at me strangely, talking louder and slower, like I was a toddler. My voice cracked. "What about Lucy?" There was a pause. "I hate to say this," Margaret said gently, "but that child is being raised more by chance than care. She gets herself ready for school. Eats cereal alone. Walks by herself. When school ends, she goes to the neighbors because no one's home." My heart broke. Lucy was only 8. She should be giggling, painting with glitter, running in the backyard, not figuring out how to make her own breakfast because her parents were too wrapped up in themselves to notice. "I want everything documented," I said. "Every photo, every bank record, every conversation. Especially anything that shows how they're treating Lucy. I want proof." "Mrs. Warner, are you planning to take legal action?" "I'm planning to protect my granddaughter. Whatever it takes." That night, I drove my rental car past my old house. The one Brian and Tessa had been trying to take from me. It was dark and empty now. Then I circled around to their house. 2 streets over. From across the street, I sat quietly, watching. The lights were on. Through the living room window, I saw Tessa pacing, phone in hand, talking animatedly. Brian sat slumped on the couch, his head in his hands. They looked stressed. Panicked. I didn't feel sorry for them. Not tonight. No sign of Lucy. Then I saw a light come on upstairs. Her room. A small shadow moved near the window. Probably brushing her teeth or laying out her pajamas. My chest tightened with longing. I wanted to run to her, hold her, tell her everything was going to be okay. My phone buzzed again. Brian this time. "Mom, please answer. I know you're upset. We didn't mean to make you feel unwanted. Tessa found some really nice places for you to stay. You'll be safe there. Cared for." "Safe from what? From my own home? From living my own life?" I didn't reply. I just stared across the street at my granddaughter's window, watching the glow fade as she went to bed alone. That's when the decision became clear. I wasn't going to wait for them to send me away. I was going to fight. Not with shouting or threats, but with something much stronger. A grandmother's love. And 17 million reasons to not mess with her. The next morning, I sat by the hotel window with a fresh cup of tea cooling in my hands, the steam curling slowly into the morning light. My mind was calm, clearer than it had been in weeks. Maybe even years. My decision had been made. My course was set. I had spent so much of my life being quiet, stepping back, letting others decide. But not anymore. I opened Margaret's email. Attached were neatly labeled folders, finances, routine logs, facility research, and one that made my stomach clench, Harlow's care. I clicked that one first. Dozens of pictures, time-stamped notes. Lucy waking up alone, pouring milk into a bowl of cereal. Walking to school with her backpack slipping off one shoulder. Sitting outside the neighbor's house in the afternoon. Waiting, forgotten. My granddaughter, being raised like a background detail in her own home. And then I opened the file labeled, Facility Research. There they were, all the places Tessa had looked into. Grainy screenshots. Names of homes with bad reputations. One had multiple violations for patient neglect. Another had rodent complaints. These were not the kind of places you send someone you love. These were where people disappeared. And I almost had. I could hear Martin's voice in the back of my mind. Calm, steady. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. I called Richard, the lawyer who had handled Martin's estate. He'd worked with our family for over 2 decades, and he was the only person I could trust with what I was about to do. Richard, it's Edith Warner. Edith, he said, surprised. It's been a while. I need to meet with you today. It's urgent. You sound resolute. I am. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from him in his quiet office, surrounded by dark wood shelves and the smell of paper and coffee. I placed Margaret's full report on his desk, along with the real notebook Martin had kept, the one filled with his invention notes, royalty records, and his last handwritten message to me. The last time I had opened it, I'd found a line that still echoed in my chest. You'll know when it's time to tell the truth. It's time, Richard, I said softly. He read through the documents, not interrupting once. Occasionally his brow furrowed. Once, he took off his glasses and rubbed his forehead. When he was done, he sat back in his chair, a long sigh escaping him. Edith, he said, this is enormous. I know. 17 million? He looked stunned. Yes, I said calmly. And I want to protect it. But more importantly, I want to protect Lucy. They're lying to her. Neglecting her. Using her. He leaned forward. So what do you want to do? First, I said, I want legal visitation rights that can't be blocked. I want to be in Lucy's life, no matter what her parents say. That'll depend on state law, but if we can prove that you have a deep, consistent bond with her and that ending that relationship would hurt her, we have a strong case. We do, I said firmly. I've been there for every birthday, every school concert. I have photos, drawings she made for me, cards. Good. What else? I pulled out a small piece of paper from my purse and slid it across the desk. I want to buy this house. It's 2 doors down from Brian and Tessa's. It's on the market. Cash offer. Close within 2 weeks. He read the address and raised an eyebrow. You're moving next door to them? I want to be close to Lucy. Close enough to see her. To step in if I need to. He smiled. I'd hate to be the ones trying to scheme behind your back now. I wasn't done. I also want to create a trust for Lucy. One they can't touch. 5 million. To be released when she turns 25, after she's had time to grow, think, and become her own person. He paused, pen in midair. Edith, that's nearly 1/3 of your estate. I know. But Lucy is my legacy. She's the only one in that family with a pure heart. Richard nodded, jotting down the notes. Anything else? I took a deep breath. I want to update my will. He looked at me, already sensing what was coming. If anything happens to me before Lucy turns 18, I want custody to go to my sister Marianne. She's retired. Lives in Oregon. Has a calm life. Brian gets nothing unless he proves he's changed. No money. No power. No access. He'll have to earn it. Not inherit it. There was a long silence. You're disinheriting your son. I'm giving him a chance to become someone better. But I'm not going to reward manipulation and betrayal. Not when Martin spent his life building something sacred. Richard leaned back, nodding slowly. This is going to shake things up. I hope so. By the time I left the office, the new documents were in motion. Trust fund, updated will, visitation paperwork. Everything would be signed and sealed within days. But the biggest shift was still coming. That evening, I made the offer on the house next to Brian's. The owners were eager to move. They accepted the deal below asking price. All cash, no questions. Within 24 hours, the house was mine. A 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch and big backyard. From the upstairs windows, I could see directly into Lucy's room. I walked through the empty house holding the new keys, every step echoing in the silence. This wasn't just a move. It was a message. One they wouldn't see coming. As I stood in the living room, I heard voices from the other side of the fence. Brian and Tessa. They were arguing. She's been gone 4 days, Brian. 4 days. What are we supposed to say? I don't know. Maybe she just needed space. You weren't supposed to let her find out. This is a disaster. I moved quietly to the wall, listening. We'll just wait a few more days, Tessa said, her voice sharper now. If she doesn't come back, we file a report. Say she's unstable. We can get control that way. Brian was quiet. Then he said, and if she doesn't come back at all? Then we say she's missing. We wait. The courts will handle the rest. Either way, we win. I backed away from the wall, heart racing. They weren't just trying to get rid of me. They were trying to erase me. My phone rang. Margaret. Mrs. Warner, I just learned something urgent. Tessa met with a lawyer who specializes in elder conservatorship. She's trying to build a case to have you declared mentally incompetent. My blood went cold. They're creating a file, Margaret continued. Stories about you being forgetful, difficult. They're planning to use that to gain control. Over your house, your money, everything. I sat down on the floor, stunned but not broken. They think they're dealing with a fragile old woman, I said quietly, staring out the window at the house I used to call home. But they're about to learn exactly who I really am. The next day, the sun was shining like nothing was wrong, as if the world hadn't shifted under my feet. I stood in front of Brian and Tessa's front door at exactly 2 p.m., dressed in the same old beige coat and flats I'd worn for years, the same look they were used to. Nothing flashy. Nothing out of place. Just Edith Warner, the grandmother, the burden, the one they thought they could pack away in a room with gray walls and a list of visiting hours. What they didn't know was that the woman standing at their door now owned the house next to theirs. That I had $17 million backing every quiet breath I took. That I had already prepared documents, secured visitation rights, and set up a trust for Lucy that no one could touch. Brian opened the door before I even knocked. He looked exhausted, bags under his eyes, hair a mess, clothes wrinkled. The kind of man who wasn't sleeping because he was losing control. Mom, he said, his voice a blend of relief and panic. Thank God. We've been calling. Where have you been? I gave a small smile, calm and cold. I needed some time to think. Tessa appeared behind him, already smiling that tight, fake smile that never reached her eyes. Edith, we were so worried. You disappeared. And Lucy's been asking about you non-stop. You can't just walk off like that. It's not safe. I stepped inside without being invited. I'm 66, not 6. I don't need permission to take a walk. The house looked the same. Clean, modern, filled with expensive things and no warmth. I could still smell Tessa's perfume in the air, that sharp floral scent that always made me feel like I didn't belong. Lucy ran down the stairs before anyone could stop her. Grandma! She threw herself into my arms, and I hugged her tight, my eyes stinging. I breathed her in, strawberry shampoo, that same soft scent I remembered from the sleepovers, bedtime stories, and cookies we baked together. I missed you, she whispered. I missed you more, I said gently. But I'm okay. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Tessa cleared her throat. Lucy, go upstairs and finish your drawings, sweetheart. Grandma's just here to talk. Can I stay with her? She asked, clinging to my arm. Not this time, love, I said, kissing the top of her head. But I'll come say goodbye before I leave. Once Lucy disappeared upstairs, we sat in the living room. I chose Martin's old recliner, the same one Brian had moved to this house after his father died. I ran my fingers over the armrest. He would have hated all of this. Brian leaned forward, hands clasped, trying to look serious. Mom, we need to talk about your future. Tessa and we've been looking into some wonderful options. Places where you'll be cared for. Safe. With medical staff. Activities. Friends your age. Tessa smiled, her voice silky. Independent living communities, really. It's not a nursing home. You'd have your own apartment, but with support available. I reached into my purse and pulled out Margaret's file. I placed it softly on the coffee table. The thick stack of paper made a dull thud against the polished wood. You mean places like the ones in here? I asked. Sunset Pines, with the rodent infestation? Or Golden Years, where 2 residents died due to staff neglect? You mean those? Their faces dropped. Brian's hand froze mid-air. Tessa's smile disappeared. I leaned back, slowly watching them. I know everything. I know you've been researching facilities for 6 months. I know you've told people I'm confused. I know you've been speaking to a lawyer about having me declared incompetent. How? Tessa stammered. How do you know that? I pulled out another card and laid it down next to the file. Margaret Chen. Private investigator. Very good at what she does. Brian sat back, his face pale. Mom. This is extreme. You hired someone to spy on us. No, I said. I hired someone to protect myself. Because clearly I needed to. Tessa stood suddenly, her voice rising. This is ridiculous. We were trying to help you. You live alone. You're vulnerable. I looked her straight in the eyes. You wanted me gone so you could sell my house and patch your finances. This wasn't about safety. It was about convenience. She sat down again. Hard. I reached into my purse once more, pulling out Martin's notebook. I opened it to the first page and began to read. Patent number 8. 74532. Automatic Pet Feeding System. Filed by Martin Warner. Royalties. $847,000 per year. Brian blinked. Patent number 9. 56498. Programmable Medication Dispenser. Royalties. $623,000. Tessa's mouth fell open. Patent number 9,834,771. Smart Irrigation Controller. Royalties. $891,000. I slid my most recent bank statement across the table. They stared at the number at the bottom. $17,200,000. The room went silent. I could hear the clock ticking above the fireplace, the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Brian looked like he'd been punched. That's not possible. You think I've been living poor because I had no other choice? I said. I did it because your father asked me to. He wanted you to learn what real success looked like, not handouts. He wanted to see what kind of man you would become without the weight of easy money. Tessa was still staring at the statement, like she thought the numbers might change if she blinked hard enough. But why didn't you tell us? Because I hoped you'd turn out better than this, I answered. I stood, gathering the documents. Their faces looked hollow now, stripped of their performance. One more thing, I said, turning to the window. See that house? I pointed to the one with the sold sign still hanging. I just bought it. I'm moving in next week. Brian stood up. You're moving next door? I want to be near Lucy. Close enough to protect her. You've lied to her once about me being sick. Try it again, and you'll see what a woman with $17 million and a clean legal record can do. Tessa looked like she might cry. I've also created a trust for Lucy. $5 million. You won't see a penny of it. She gets it when she turns 25. Brian put his hands to his face, groaning softly. And if something happens to me, I continued, Lucy goes to live with Marianne. My lawyer has all the documents. You get nothing, unless you show that you've changed. Earn it, or lose it. I walked to the stairs. Now, I'm going to say goodbye to Lucy. Tessa stood. Edith, please. I turned to her slowly. If you lie to her about me again, if you try to turn her against me the way you did with Brian, I will rain legal hell on this house until you can't breathe. She said nothing. Upstairs, Lucy was coloring at her desk. She looked up, smiling. Are you leaving again? I sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. No, sweetheart. I'm moving in next door. Her eyes lit up. Really? Really? And I need you to remember something. If anyone tells you Grandma is sick, or confused, or can't take care of herself, they're lying. I'm just fine. And I'll always be here for you. She nodded, very seriously. I'll remember. I kissed her forehead. Downstairs, I didn't say goodbye. They didn't deserve it. But they had plenty to think about. It had only been 2 days since I moved into the house next door, but already, it felt like I had stepped into a new life. The walls were still bare, the furniture basic, but it didn't matter. From my upstairs window, I could see Lucy's room clearly. Every evening, I'd watch the glow of her lamp turn on, and her little silhouette move across the window. That small light reminded me why I was here. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal from Brian or the lies from Tessa. It was knowing how alone Lucy must have felt in that house, caught between two adults who barely looked up from their phones long enough to notice her. All I ever wanted was to give her the kind of love and safety that every child deserves. And now, I finally had the power to do it. My phone rang. It was Margaret again. "Mrs. Warner, you told me to keep digging. I've got something you need to hear." "Go ahead." "Tessa met with her lawyer again yesterday. They're still trying to build a case that you're mentally unwell. They're collecting anything they can twist into evidence. Missed calls, moments you seemed quiet, things like that. They want the court to declare you legally incompetent." I felt the world tilt for a second. Even after everything I had revealed, they were still moving forward. Still trying to destroy my name, my independence, my entire life. "They're not giving up?" I whispered. "No," Margaret said gently. "They're desperate. They see your house and your money as the only way out of their financial mess. They're ready to say anything to get control of it." I looked out the window again. Lucy's curtain was open. I could see her sitting at her desk, probably coloring, lost in her own little world. "I want to meet them," I said suddenly. "Face to face. I want to tell them I'm ready to come home. Let's give them what they want, or at least, let them think I am." There was a pause. "Mrs. Warner, are you sure? That could be risky." "I know," I replied. "But I'm not doing this for me. I need to show them what happens when they underestimate a woman who's been silent for too long." The meeting was set for Saturday. I chose the time. I chose the place. I showed up at their front door wearing the same old coat they'd always seen me in, clutching the same purse, like nothing had changed. Tessa opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Edith," she said, as if I were a guest she hadn't seen in ages. "Come in. We're so glad you're here." Brian stood behind her, trying to look calm, but his jaw was tight. His eyes flickered to mine and then quickly away. I stepped inside, letting the silence sit between us for a moment before I spoke. "I thought it was time we talked. About my future." We sat down in the living room, the same room where they'd once whispered about sending me away. I could almost feel the ghosts of their plans swirling in the air. Brian started, voice low. "We know things got tense. But we just want what's best for you, Mom." Tessa nodded. "We really do. That's why we've looked at several wonderful communities. Some are so nice, they have art classes, walking paths, even a salon." I took out my phone, opened the voice recording app, and placed it gently on the table. "What are you doing?" Tessa asked, her voice sharp now. "I want to make sure we all remember this conversation clearly." Brian leaned forward. "Mom, come on. You don't need to record this." "Actually, I do," I said calmly. "Because I know exactly what you're planning. I know about the debts. The second mortgage. The maxed out cards. I know about the lawyer Tessa hired. I know she's been telling people that I'm confused and can't take care of myself." Tessa opened her mouth, but no words came out. Brian looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. I pulled out Margaret's report and set it next to the phone. Pages and pages of evidence. Photos. Dates. Transcripts. "Do you want to talk about Golden Years Care?" I asked. "The facility you were about to send me to? Where state inspectors found elderly patients left unattended for hours. Or maybe the lawyer who's preparing to declare me mentally incompetent, just so you can take over my house and bank account." Brian's face turned white. You had us followed?" "No. I had myself protected." Tessa jumped to her feet. "This is insane. You're blowing this all out of proportion." I stood slowly. "No, Tessa. What's insane is trying to lock away your husband's mother so you can pay off your credit cards." Brian whispered, "Mom, we were just scared. We didn't know what to do. Everything was falling apart." I stared at him for a long time. "I gave you a gift once. $50,000 for the down payment on this house. You thought it came from your dad's insurance, but it didn't. It was from me. I've helped you quietly for years, hoping you'd learn how to stand on your own." His lips parted, But he didn't speak. I wanted to believe you were still the boy I raised. The one who cried when his goldfish died. The one who used to say he'd take care of me when I got old. Tessa sat down again, eyes glassy. So, what now? You're just going to sit in that house next door and spy on us? Use your money to make us miserable? No, I said, picking up the report and tucking it into my purse. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to garden, read, drink tea on my porch. And I'm going to love my granddaughter without your permission. I paused by the stairs. And if either of you lie to Lucy again, if you poison her heart the way you tried to poison mine, I will use every dollar, every lawyer, every ounce of strength I have to fight for custody. And I'll win. I walked upstairs. Lucy was sitting on the floor with her coloring book. Grandma, she smiled. I hugged her. I just wanted to say goodbye. Her smile faded. Are you leaving again? No, sweetheart, I whispered. I'm just going home, next door. I'll be close. Always. And if mommy or daddy ever tell you I'm sick or confused, you remember this moment. I'm okay. I've never been stronger. She nodded slowly. I believe you. I kissed her cheek and walked out without another word to Brian or Tessa. They didn't deserve another goodbye. Outside, the sky was soft with evening light. The wind was gentle, carrying the quiet rustle of tree branches. I walked back to my new home, not just the house I bought, but the life I had chosen. A life of strength, truth, and the kind of love that fights back. The leaves turned from green to gold, then fell gently onto the quiet streets of our neighborhood. The house I'd bought, the one right next to Brian and Tessa's, had slowly become more than just a statement. It had become home. There was peace here. Not because everything had been fixed, but because I had stopped waiting for others to choose peace for me. Most afternoons, I sat on my porch with a book and a cup of tea, the breeze brushing my face, the sound of children playing in the distance. And nearly every day after school, Lucy would run down the short path from her house to mine, backpack bouncing, pigtails swaying. Grandma! She'd shout, dropping her bag and hugging me tight before heading straight for the kitchen to check if I'd baked anything. Sometimes it was cookies. Sometimes just toast with cinnamon sugar. She didn't care. What mattered was that someone had thought of her, waited for her, loved her. She spent hours at my table doing homework, chattering about her day. We planted flowers in the backyard, painted rocks with silly faces, watched the same movie 3 times because she liked one particular song. This wasn't about spoiling her. It was about showing her what it felt like to be seen. One Saturday afternoon, she was riding her bike up and down my driveway. The training wheels were off now. Her legs were stronger, her confidence growing. Grandma, look! She shouted, flying past with her arms out. No hands. I clapped, laughing. Just don't forget to use the brakes. She laughed back, full of joy. The front door of Brian's house opened. He walked over slowly, his hands tucked in his jacket pockets. His steps were unsure, like he wasn't quite sure what to say or how to say it. These visits had become more regular, though never predictable. Hey, Mom, he said, sitting down beside me. She's doing better, huh? She's thriving, I replied simply. Structure, safety, attention. Those things matter more than people realize. He nodded, watching Lucy make another circle with her bike. I wanted to say, thank you, he said quietly. For what? For still being here. For not shutting us out completely. After everything. I didn't answer right away. The breeze picked up, lifting a few leaves into the air. I watched them float and settle again before I spoke. I didn't stay for you, Brian. I stayed for her. But I'm glad you're trying. He rubbed his hands together slowly. Tessa's trying too. I think she's really starting to see things differently. I turned to look at him. She's still shopping like money grows on trees? No, he said with a faint smile. She canceled all her store cards. Started selling a few of her old designer handbags. She's even driving a used car now. I raised an eyebrow. Really? She's embarrassed, he admitted. But she says she's willing to earn forgiveness. I looked toward the kitchen window, where Tessa stood, watching us. She waved nervously. I gave her a small nod. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something. Lucy rode up to us, breathless and grinning. Daddy! Grandma and I made a photo album. Want to see? Of course, he said, standing with her. She darted into the house, and Brian hesitated before following. She's different, he said softly. Since being with you. Happier. Calmer. I looked at him again, this time longer. You were different once too, Brian. A good kind of different. He looked down. I lost myself for a while. I didn't answer. Some things didn't need words. Just time. Lucy returned with a thick photo album made from purple construction paper and glitter glue. She placed it between us and began flipping through the pages. This is the first day we planted our garden, she said proudly, pointing at a photo of us kneeling in the dirt. And here's the tomatoes we picked last week. Brian smiled. Looks like you've been busy. Grandma says when we grow strawberries, we can make jam and give it to the neighbors. That's a great idea, he said, his voice softer now. After Lucy ran inside to wash her hands for dinner, Brian remained on the porch, looking thoughtful. Mom, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you think I can still be a good father? His question was so simple and so raw that it caught me off guard. All the rehearsed lines, all the things I had prepared to say for months suddenly didn't seem to matter. This wasn't the man who had tried to throw me away. This was my son, lost, trying, hoping. You were always a kind boy, I said slowly. You cried when your friend moved away. You gave your lunch to a kid who forgot his. You buried your goldfish in the backyard with a little handmade gravestone. That heart is still in you. You just need to let it lead again. And Tessa, he asked, do you think she can change? I don't know. But change isn't about apologies. It's about patterns. And whether she shows Lucy that love isn't something to earn, but something freely given. He nodded, blinking quickly. I want to try. Then try, Brian. And keep trying. Don't just show up for Lucy. Stay present. Choose her. Every day. He stood and took a deep breath. Thank you, Mom. For everything. As he walked back toward his house, I turned to watch Lucy through the window. She was laughing with Tessa, showing her something on the album. And to my surprise, Tessa was smiling too. Not the fake kind. Something quieter. Maybe even real. I wasn't naive. I knew everything wasn't fixed. But this was a start. And after everything, sometimes a start is all we need. A week later, I was sitting in the kitchen sipping my tea while Lucy colored quietly at the table. The light was warm through the windows, and the house smelled faintly of banana bread we had baked earlier. She was humming to herself, completely at peace. I didn't interrupt. Watching her like that, calm, happy, safe, was the greatest reward I'd felt in years. Then, a soft knock at the door. I opened it and found Tessa standing there. No makeup, hair in a loose ponytail, wearing plain jeans and a sweatshirt, a far cry from her usual polished appearance. She looked nervous, her hands clutching a small paper bag. Hi, Edith, she said quietly. I was wondering if we could talk. Alone. I hesitated. Then stepped aside. Lucy, sweetheart, I said gently, why don't you water the garden while Grandma talks to your mom? Lucy nodded and skipped outside, leaving us in the quiet kitchen. Tessa sat across from me at the table, placing the paper bag in front of her. I brought lemon scones. From that little bakery you like. It felt like a peace offering, and while my heart wasn't ready to soften completely, I didn't push it away either. Thank you, I said, though my tone stayed careful. She looked down, fidgeting with her fingers. I owe you a real apology, she began. Not the kind I gave before. Not the polite version. The honest one. I waited. I was wrong. Completely wrong. I was raised to believe that money fixes things, that comfort and control are the only ways to feel secure. But in chasing that, I became someone I don't even like anymore. Someone who would plan to push away her daughter's grandmother. She paused, her voice trembling now. I thought if I had everything under control, I'd feel safe. But I didn't. I only became colder. And I hurt people. I hurt you. I hurt Lucy. I didn't even realize how much until I saw how she lights up around you. How she runs here after school like this is the only place she feels free. My throat tightened, but I stayed quiet. I was scared, Edith. Scared of not having enough. Scared of losing Brian. Scared of being compared to you, because you're kind and steady, and I was loud and selfish. So I tried to erase you. I told myself you were in the way. And now? I asked softly. Now I see you're the reason this family still has a chance. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. I don't expect forgiveness right away. But I'm asking for a chance to earn it. I studied her face. There were no excuses in her words. No blame shifting. Just quiet, heavy regret. That was new. What changed your mind? I asked. Watching Lucy with you, she whispered. Seeing how safe she is. How confident. How loved. I realized I've been trying to build her a future, while neglecting her present. We sat there in silence for a while. Sometimes, silence tells more truth than words. Then Lucy came back inside, her cheeks pink from the sun. Mommy, she said, surprised to see Tessa. Did you come to visit Grandma? Tessa gave her a small smile and nodded. I did. Grandma and I are making jam next week. From the strawberries we grew. Tessa blinked. That sounds amazing, sweetie. Lucy looked at me. Can Mommy come help too? I glanced at Tessa. She looked just as surprised as I was. If Grandma says it's okay, she said carefully. I looked at Lucy, her bright, hopeful eyes. Then back at Tessa, who seemed to be holding her breath. All right, I said. But no bossing us around in the kitchen. Lucy cheered, and Tessa laughed softly, a real laugh. It was a small moment, but sometimes those are the ones that matter most. Later that evening, after Lucy had gone home and the kitchen was clean, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the notebook Martin had left me. The last page still held his words. You'll know when it's time to tell the truth. Our grandson deserves better than we had. And Kurt deserves the chance to be the man I know he can be. But some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Of course, for me it was Lucy, not a grandson. And Brian, not Kurt. But the meaning remained. Martin had always known that truth is powerful, but only when people are ready for it. The next morning, I met Richard, my lawyer, to review the final papers. The trust for Lucy had been funded and locked. The new will was completed. My house, fully secured. My medical and legal rights, protected. And most importantly, my role in Lucy's life could no longer be taken from me. After we finished signing, Richard leaned back in his chair. You've built a fortress, Edith. Ironclad. They can't touch a single thing without your consent. I didn't do it to keep them out, I said quietly. I did it to protect what matters most. And now? He asked. Now. I wait. I watch. And I hope. That evening, as I sat by the window, Lucy texted me. Grandma, can I sleep over next weekend? We can bake and paint. I smiled and typed back. Of course, sweetheart. I'll have the paintbrushes ready. She replied with a heart emoji and a picture of a cat wearing sunglasses. Outside, I could hear laughter from Brian's backyard. I peeked out and saw him and Lucy kicking a ball together. Tessa sat nearby, clapping and cheering when Lucy scored a goal. It wasn't perfect. Not yet. But it was a family trying. Sometimes the biggest changes come slowly. Not with grand gestures. But with small steps, honest words, and quiet effort. They were beginning again. And this time so was I. Spring rolled in quietly, bringing with it soft breezes, fresh blossoms, and a strange sense of stillness. Not the kind that made you anxious, but the kind that made you reflect. Life wasn't perfect, but for the first time in years, it felt balanced. Every Saturday morning, Lucy would come over with her sketchbook and that same wide smile that always melted my heart. Sometimes we'd go to the farmer's market, and other times, we'd sit in the garden sipping lemonade, just talking. She loved asking questions, about when her daddy was little, about what her grandpa used to do, about whether birds ever get tired of flying. She was growing up fast, but there was still so much softness in her spirit. I wanted to protect that. Keep it alive in a world that too often pushed children to grow up before they were ready. Brian and Tessa were still figuring things out. They had their moments, rough ones from what I could tell. But there was also something different now. A willingness to pause, to listen, to try. One Sunday afternoon, Brian knocked on my door. He didn't have an excuse or a fake reason this time. He just asked if he could come in. I nodded, stepping aside. He sat at the kitchen table, looking around the room that had quickly become the heart of my new life. The smell of vanilla lingered in the air from the cupcakes Lucy and I had baked earlier. One sat on a plate in front of him. He didn't touch it yet. "I wanted to tell you something," he said finally. I waited. "I've started going to therapy," he said quietly. "Couples therapy with Tessa. And some sessions alone too." I wasn't expecting that. I tilted my head, studying him. "I realized I've been blaming you for a lot of things that weren't your fault. Things from when I was a kid. Times you weren't even there. And that's not fair." I stayed silent. "I've also realized," he continued, "that maybe I've been scared of becoming a disappointment. And somewhere along the way, I stopped trying not to be." He looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes that had been missing: humility. "I don't know how to fix everything I broke," he said. "But I want to try. Not for the money. Not because of Lucy. Just because I'm tired of pretending I didn't mess up." I finally spoke, my voice steady. "That little boy you used to be? He would have been proud of you today." Brian blinked quickly and looked down. "I'm not proud yet. But I'm starting to believe I could be." We sat in silence for a while. Then he smiled slightly and pointed to the cupcake. "Are these the famous vanilla ones Lucy won't stop talking about?" I pushed the plate toward him. "You're lucky she let you have one." He laughed and took a bite. She was right. These are magic. That same week, I had a long phone call with Marianne, my sister in Oregon. She was thrilled to hear things were improving. She offered to come visit in the summer and bring her dog, which Lucy would love. I told her she was always welcome. And I meant it. I also received a letter from Richard, my lawyer, confirming the official transfer of the trust fund and the new clauses we'd added. Lucy was now legally protected from any financial interference until she turned 25, unless an emergency required it, and only under court approval. I didn't tell Brian or Tessa about that part. They didn't need to know every detail. The important thing was, Lucy's future was secure. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting everything in warm orange and pink, Lucy and I sat on the porch together. "Grandma," she said, her legs swinging under the bench, "do you think people can really change?" I looked at her. So young, yet already asking the kind of questions that took most people decades to understand. "Yes, sweetheart," I said softly. "But only if they really want to. And only if they work hard, even when it hurts." She nodded like she was filing it away. "I think Mommy's trying," she added after a pause. "I think she is too." Lucy smiled and leaned against me. "You know what I'm going to be when I grow up?" she asked suddenly. "What?" "A person who helps old people feel safe. Like you made me feel safe." My throat tightened. I kissed the top of her head. "You already do that," I whispered. A few days later, Tessa invited me over for dinner. Not just me and Lucy, just me. I hesitated at first. But then I said yes. The table was set simply, with candles and home-cooked food that smelled surprisingly good. Tessa didn't dress up. She didn't act like a host. She acted like a woman who knew she had something to prove, and was willing to start with small, honest steps. "I'm still learning," she said over dinner. "Still unlearning too." I appreciated that more than she knew. Unlearning is harder than learning. It takes courage. We didn't talk about money. Or the past. We just talked. About Lucy. About books. About gardening. We laughed at something silly, and for a moment, I saw a version of Tessa I'd never met before. Later that night, as I washed the dishes back at my house, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. I looked older, sure. But not weak. Not forgotten. I looked like a woman who had faced a storm and still stood tall. A woman who had reclaimed her voice. A woman who had learned that family isn't about blood or shared last names. It's about effort, truth, and love that chooses to stay, even when it has every reason to walk away. It was a Sunday morning. Clear skies, soft wind, and the smell of fresh dew rising from the grass. I stood in my small garden, the one Lucy and I had built from nothing. The strawberries were already sprouting, and the tomatoes were coming in strong. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it had been grown with love. Lucy was inside helping me set the table for brunch. It had become our little tradition. Pancakes, jam, tea, and laughter. Brian and Tessa were coming too. They'd been showing up more often now. Not out of guilt or obligation, but something gentler. Something like family. As I poured the orange juice and laid out the plates, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the kitchen window again. That same soft face, those tired but steady eyes. My silver hair was pinned back neatly. I looked like a woman who had weathered storms and refused to be washed away. When the doorbell rang, I didn't rush. I walked to the door calmly and opened it to find Brian holding a bouquet of daffodils, Tessa with a dish of baked eggs, and Lucy, grinning from ear to ear. "Happy Sunday, Grandma," she sang. "Happy Sunday, my little sunshine." They stepped inside, the scent of breakfast filling the air. We sat around the table like a family. Not a perfect one, but a growing one. Brian reached for the butter and said, "Remember when you used to make those pancakes shaped like dinosaurs?" "I do," I laughed. "You always ate the tail first." Lucy giggled. "Can you make a heart one next time?" "I think I can manage that." Tessa spoke quietly. "Edith, thank you for letting us back in." I looked at her for a long moment. It's not about letting people back in. It's about whether they knock with clean hands. She nodded slowly, understanding. That was enough for me. After we finished eating, Lucy dragged us all outside to look at the garden. She pointed at the tiny green strawberries and told Brian, "When they're red, Grandma and I are going to make jam and sell it at a lemonade stand." "We'll be your first customers," Brian said, smiling. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't in a very long time. Peace. The house next door, once a place of betrayal, now stood as a reminder of what healing can look like. Not flashy. Not fast. But real. Honest. Earned. Later, after they left and the sun began to dip, I sat in my rocking chair on the porch. A breeze passed through, rustling the flowers, and I closed my eyes, just breathing it all in. I thought about everything that had happened. The whispers. The lies. The fear of being forgotten. The betrayal from the people I loved the most. And yet I had not broken. I had rebuilt myself. Not with revenge, but with strength. Not by shouting but by standing firm. Not by fighting to be feared, but by refusing to be erased. I realized then what my late husband Martin had always known. Sometimes the quietest strength is the most powerful. Not the kind that storms in, but the kind that stands tall even after everyone else walks away. Lucy was safe. Brian was healing. Tessa was trying. And me? I was finally free. Not just from their plans, but from the fear that I had no value once I grew older. That I could be pushed aside, locked away, and forgotten. I had found my voice. My worth. My place. Not because anyone gave it to me, but because I remembered who I was, and I never let go. Moral of the story. Aging is not a weakness, and love is not a transaction. Real strength doesn't come from money or power. It comes from knowing your worth even when others forget it. We must protect what matters, speak when it's hardest, and never let others decide when our story ends. Because dignity is not something you're given. It's something you claim. And when you do, no one can take it away again.